Right, so we're almost 10 weeks on from when you formally resigned as Prime Minister. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, it's gone by incredibly quickly. I remember at the time when I resigned thinking that I'd have this long period before I left Parliament where I would be able to do so many things, you know, farewell people, archive, pack. It's flown by.
How has life changed?
The parts of my life that are about my family have expanded, and
I'm sure they've been seeing a lot more.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting joy out of the little things. I took Neve to a 5th birthday party on the weekend, and halfway through, I suddenly realised that I hadn't thought about having to be anywhere else or do anything else or leaving early. I could just be there, which was really lovely.
That must be so special for her.
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean, gosh, she was probably finding the fact that I was trailing around after her probably quite irritating. So,
she's 4, isn't she?
Yeah. So, I tried as much as I could to be a present mum while I was doing the role of Prime Minister, and I had amazing people who helped me be a present mum. But now I get to do the other things. I get to make the school lunches and then see it returned at the end of the day uneaten, and all of those things that you probably take for granted. It's
been an extraordinary 5 years for you as Prime Minister. You started the role at the age of 37, the youngest Prime Minister for New Zealand in over 150 years, I think it is. And then you did something that nobody had done in New Zealand before. You had a baby while you were the Prime Minister. What was that like to become a new mum on a global stage? Because there was so much focus on it.
Yeah. At the time, I was just taking every day as it came. Look, in the first 20 weeks where I wasn't really telling anyone, that was quite a difficult period. I vividly remember on the day of the speech from the throne, so it's a very big day of pomp and ceremony. The Governor-General comes and reads the government statement to the House. All MPs file into the legislative chamber for the ceremony. And that morning, I had terrible morning sickness. I'd thrown up before I came to Parliament, and when we arrived and the Governor-General came in, it's the one occasion where the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister sit at the front of the room and face the audience.
Yes, yeah.
And I was seated next to the Governor-General, and I had this terrible wave of nausea, and I thought, I need to get out of here.
And so nobody knew you were pregnant?
No one knew I was pregnant.
You were thinking, I am going to throw up any second now.
Any moment. I was scanning around the room thinking, what is the most discreet exit? But there was no way to be discreet because I literally was facing everybody, and it took all my will to hold it together. So there were plenty of moments in time where these very significant things were going on, and I was just trying to manage the normal parts of being a new mum. But you just got on with it, and when I think back to it, I think, how did Clark and I do it? But we did.
The whole country and mums are thinking, how did you do it?
Yeah, it's the same way every mum does. You just take every day as it comes. Yeah, one foot in front of the other.
When you reflect back on the 6 weeks that you allowed to have with your baby, to have with Neve after she was born, was that the right call, do you think?
It was the only call. I don't think back on it and think, I should have done anything differently at that time, because the reality was that whilst I am and will always be an advocate for women having as much time as they can, and we increased paid parental leave to 26 weeks, and I'm very proud of that.
But would you maybe wanted more time if you could have, but you just didn't feel like you could with the role?
And look, I didn't feel like I could, and I don't believe I could. I was the Prime Minister of a coalition government. When I left for those 6 weeks, I handed over to the leader of another party. And so I was very conscious that I'd been elected to do a job, and I needed to do that job. Look, it was what it was. But again, we made it work. Clark would come over to Parliament with Neve. because of course through that whole period I tried to continue to keep up all the things that I wanted to keep up, like feeding her and so on. She'd come to caucus with me. We just made it work. But no, I don't regret that because it was what it was.
Yeah. You said when you resigned, and you were quite emotional when you said it.
Yes.
And to Neve, Mum's going to be there for your first day of school.
Yes. Yep.
I wonder how much of your decision came down to thinking about your daughter.
Oh, look, it's hard for me to, give you a weighting for all the different things that weighed on my mind. The one thing I will say is that it wasn't all entirely for me a selfish decision. Look, I of course wanted to spend more time with my family and I wanted to be more present, but I actually felt like it was the right decision for New Zealand too. I did, because I felt like I'd come through a significant period with everyone doing the best job I could, but looking forward, I knew I couldn't commit all of myself in the same way I had to another 3. And if you can't do that, then someone else needs to, because you've got to have a complete tank. You've got to have so much energy and stamina for the job. And so for me, it was the right decision for New Zealand and for me.
And for you.
Yeah.
Was there anything, though, that you missed with Neve, that you regret, that you wish you could have been there for?
I think every parent, regardless of their circumstance, will think, oh, if only in those younger years I'd been able to do this or that. I don't think I'm unique in that situation, but I don't look back with regret because, for me, it was about being the best mother I could be, but also being the best Prime Minister I could be. And what a privilege to be able to do both, because I didn't think I'd do either.
It's true, it's true. Yeah, I think, as you say, every mum or dad,
absolutely.
It's a balance, and you try and strike a balance.
Absolutely. I honestly believe no matter what your circumstances, you'll have those moments, and then if you're there 100% of the time, you'll have those moments about the other things that you should be doing for other people in your life or for other work in your life. I think it's a constant presence. And it just depends on which side of the ledger it is. But the fact that we feel that is because we have such great love for our children, and that's a privilege too. So, I don't have regrets. There are things I miss. There were sacrifices that Clark made, that Neve made, but I don't look back on any of it with disappointment or regret at all, no.
What was the exact moment when you solidified in your mind, where you made the decision, I am resigning?
Yeah, it was quite an iterative process for me. It wasn't that I suddenly sat bolt upright in bed one morning and said to Clark, that's it, I'm out.
But there would have been a moment where you said, okay, this is it, I'm actually going to
Leading up to at the end of last year, I could feel that I was weary. I felt like the 5 years I was finding it hard to rejuvenate myself, and I knew, and I knew that I needed a really full tank to take myself into an election year. I've seen some overseas outlets frame it as burnout. I wouldn't call it that. I had, the ability to continue, but I wanted to continue at a level that required just much more than I had left. And so over summer, I thought I owe it to myself to try and see whether or not I can refresh in this break. But over that period, it became clear to me that it was time.
Okay. Yeah, you said at the time, there's a responsibility to know when you are the right person to lead and also when you are not.
Yep.
So why were you not the right person to lead? And you say it's a decision for you and for New Zealand.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, because when I, having gone through some significant crises alongside New Zealand, you do not know what will come your way, but you have to have enough in reserve to take on whatever it is. And yes, I could do the job and I could keep going, but did I have enough in reserve that if another significant event came our way, let alone an election, could I hand on heart say that I was going to be there at 100% of my capacity for another 3 years? I knew casting forward I didn't have that in me.
And of course, Cyclone Gabrielle. Well, first the Auckland floods and then Cyclone Gabrielle
and
came up.
Yeah, and that's just, again, a demonstration. These things come our way. You have to have enough in reserve to take that forward. And I knew that it would be disingenuous to stand up at an election and say, elect me, when I just didn't have what I felt it would take for another term.
Some would say, though, that you quit before you could be voted out.
No, I mean, if you're afraid of losing, you shouldn't be in politics. So
you would have been you would have been totally comfortable for the dent that brand Jacinda would take if you were to lose the election.
If you go into politics just to preserve yourself from loss, that's not the right motivation for being there. And I have lost. I've run as a candidate before and not succeeded. That's not a reason to make such a significant decision. It wasn't about that for me, no. And look, in 2017, plenty of people thought that was an election where I would lose. I wasn't afraid of that. This decision was solely about whether I was the right person to keep going, given how I was feeling.
How you're feeling, yeah. Okay, well, if we accept that, though, but also look at the commentary that is
people
around.
can accept it or not, it just happens to be the truth.
That's what you believe, that's what you're telling us. And,
absolutely.
And that's absolutely fine. Do you think, though, there's commentary around saying that you going has been really good for Labour because you became a lightning rod for all of that sort of anger and hatred. There was the very extreme stuff that we saw around the protests at Parliament, but also just the general unhappiness of the country coming off the back of a pandemic that had dragged on. Were you the red rag to the voters' ball?
Oh, look, other people will make that assessment.
My own.
Yeah, I do. I had considered, because of course, I experience people's thoughts and feelings about me face to face, and I could see that there were people on both ends of the extreme, as much as there were some who I absolutely am aware felt very strongly in a negative way about me and my leadership. There were equally some people who would approach me with the most lovely messages, and still do. And so that's on both ends. And my experience of one was actually far greater in the positive than it was in the negative. But it did occur to me that actually my departure might just take a bit of heat out. Was it the basis of my decision? No.
Okay.
But I did believe that might be one of the consequences of it. And
one of the positive consequences for your party?
Well, I didn't think about it as a party political thing. I thought about it as whether or not that would just be good for New Zealand as a whole. And I do think that just taking a pause, taking a breath, and reminding each other that we're all just humans, if my departure has given everyone a bit of time to maybe step back from those extreme emotions, that's not a bad thing either.
Yeah, there's a small but very vocal and active group of people who believe that you're a fascist, who, wrongly so, depicted you as Hitler out on the front lawn of the Parliament here. There have been death threats. 8 people have gone through the court system because of credible threats made against you and your family. What was it like to be on the receiving end of that? And what was the mental toll of it?
Yeah, so, my honest reflection is that I did not experience that day to day. It is fair to say that near the latter part of COVID, there was a period, of course, where, as you say, a small group did make that view known. And of course I was aware of the mis and disinformation swirling around. And that was personally quite hard because, of course, when you're a rational person, you want to just almost confront those individuals and say, do you really believe that I would be involved in anything that would hurt our people in our nation? You really want to confront it because in some cases it's so ridiculous, some of the conspiracy. So that was personally quite challenging.
Where do you think it tipped over? Do you think it was around the borders being closed for as long as they were, and the vaccine mandate? And looking back, if you had your time again, would you reconsider those two things?
I think it was actually I think it was just generally vaccination, not just the issue of whether or not you had to be vaccinated to work in certain areas.
That's what led to people losing their jobs.
But that, just to be clear, it was when vaccinations generally, I started to see certain activity start. So, you know, and then obviously that then culminated with the protests. And, you know, of course that was extraordinarily difficult. And, you know, if I have a low light, it was that, you know, for a group of people to reach that point, you know, that was awful. It was. I don't think I hid that. I found that incredibly hard. I think everyone in this parliament did, because everyone had worked so hard on unity through COVID, and to see us reach that point. But at the same time, you ask for, would I have done things differently? I've thought about different paths we could have taken, but ultimately we were working hard to get the highest rates of vaccination possible to save people's lives, and we did. Was it a hard path? Absolutely.
Yeah. There were credible threats to your own safety and to your families. Have you ever had to put a specific security detail on leave?
I don't tend to talk about any of that, as you can imagine, for personal reasons and security reasons. We don't really talk about the decisions that the police make. But I would be deeply saddened if New Zealand's overall view of my time in office was that I was experiencing hatred or misogyny 100% of the time. I didn't. Were there moments? Of course. And do we all need to think about, in the same way that politicians need to remember that we're here in the service of our people, I think it would, we need to remember as well that politicians are also humans, trying to do their best they can for the most part. But day to day, my experience was a positive one. You know, day to day, my overriding memories will be of the moment a woman just came up to me, a random stranger, and handed me a cup of tea, or the notes people would pass me on planes just giving me encouragement, or the beautiful, beautiful letters. You know, those are my memories. Yeah.
You said back in 2017, and this was just before you became the deputy leader at the time, you said in a magazine interview, I'm constantly anxious about making mistakes. Everything in politics feels so fragile. But just like that, you could stumble, and forever that's what you'll be known for. And then you said becoming party leader would just mean having more people to let down. Then, of course, you became Prime Minister.
Never changed that view. I still held that view the entire time. You've
been through so many things as PM, and you know, a lot has been said about the unprecedented times. But of course, there was the March 15 mosque attacks, 51 people killed, Whakaari White Island, a death toll of 22 people. COVID's now more than 2,500. What kind of toll, if any, has that taken on your mental health, on you as a person, not as a Prime Minister, but as a person?
Oh, you know, look, when I reflect back on all of those times, I think one of the things I found very grounding was that, you know, I was always secondary to the people who had experienced the grief and the trauma of the event itself. And so...
but it would build up, surely, you know, especially because it was unrelenting. And, you know, your job was to lead the country through all of this. Whose job was it to check in on you?
People checked in. I felt very well cared for. Did it have an impact on me personally? Absolutely. I don't think I would be human if it didn't. And probably there are some things that I remember at the time thinking, I'll process that and deal with that later.
How did that manifest?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Okay.
I don't think there was the time, and when you think about it, I mean, March 15, then at the end of the year, Whakaari, then COVID. It was an unrelenting period, but I am okay, and I will be okay. And that was in large part because I was surrounded by people who supported me to do my job, who looked out for me, and I was also aware of the things I needed to do just to make sure that I could keep going as well.
Yeah. You sort of, making light of it and laughing about it. But a lot is, we've talked a lot about mental health in New Zealand, and you particularly have in your Prime Ministership.
Yeah.
Do you think that part of that processing that you need to do afterwards might involve seeing a therapist or a psychologist or?
I haven't given that particularly, I think what I would say is that, anyone who goes through a period of stress or experiences anxiety will know what works for them. I'm certainly not a person who can stand here and tell people what it is they should or shouldn't be doing. What I feel I would like to leave as a legacy is that people feel they can at least talk about it, that they can talk about their experiences, they can talk about the impact it's had on them, that they, seek the support they need. And so what did that mean for me? It meant talking about the fact that yes, things were hard, showing emotion, and saying that actually, at some point there are things that I will spend some time reflecting on, but it was never about me. And I'm very conscious of that. Those events and those moments in time, they happened to someone else. I was just there in the front row when it did.
When you reflect back on your 5 years as Prime Minister, is it a job that you would want your daughter to do?
Yes, it is.
You would encourage
I would
to
encourage,
get into politics?
I will encourage her to do whatever gives her joy.
But it's a tough role, and it is constantly criticised.
Yeah.
And you've just experienced it. It's a 24/7 job.
It is. Yeah, it is. And yet, I came to this place because I believed as a politician you can make a difference, and I leave believing I did. And so, what more can you ask for than the satisfaction of such a privileged position to do a hard job? But an incredibly fulfilling one. I wouldn't change it for the world. And I leave now, with a baby girl, a partner I love, a family who still speak to me. And I hope, importantly to me, I hope with my integrity intact.
And Neve one day may follow in your footsteps, and
She
would
may.
encourage her to.
She may, but I actually want her to not have the pressure to fulfill anyone's expectations but her own. I want her to know that she can do whatever she wants. She's not the daughter of an ex-Prime Minister. She's Neve. She's her own person. And I hope that she has the same experience I hope for all girls in New Zealand, that they don't feel held back by their gender. They feel like they can do anything and they can do it their way. That's all I hope for.
Do you think that will be your legacy? What do you think your legacy will be?
I get a lot of letters from kids, and they're lovely. I was just reading one just before, and it said that it was from a little girl. She said, in our class, I got voted the most likely to be Jacinda. And I thought, isn't that lovely? If I can just simply walk away knowing that there will be kids and girls in particular who think they can do this job just like me and do it with kindness and empathy and compassion, then job done. Yeah.
Okay. What's your biggest regret?
All of the things I came in to do, they don't have endpoints on them. The big stuff doesn't, inequality, child poverty, climate change. If you're aspiring to deal with the big stuff, they don't have endpoints. So I'm proud of the progress we made. There are things, though, moments in time that I wish it didn't have to be that way. I wish we never had a protest on the forecourt of Parliament. I often think were there other ways? Could that have been avoided? I don't know the answer, but we wouldn't be human and we wouldn't learn if we didn't reflect on those things, and I still do.
What's it been like? You called climate change your nuclear-free moment.
Yeah.
What has it been like watching the new Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, take your nuclear-free moment and throw it on the policy bonfire?
Well, two things.
Not all of it, but some of it.
Well, the two things I would say is that, you're not going to see me be a commentator on the role of Prime Minister in New Zealand for every Prime Minister that follows me, because I had the privilege of doing that job, but I also know how hard it is. And so I'm going to leave him to do his.
But he is dismantling the work that you put in around climate change before your eyes.
So
Some really key stuff.
The Zero Carbon Act, the carbon budgets, the emissions reduction plan, the nationally determined contribution, these are all the framework for our ongoing work on climate change. And they're there, and I hope will continue to be there for governments to come. But Chris has my full support, because I know that job and I know how hard it is. And you won't get me commentating, not now, not ever.
Okay.
I've had my time. It's his now.
So you're satisfied with your record on climate change? You're satisfied that you did all that you could?
Yeah, I am. But the job is not done. I mean, this is with the big stuff. It's, you know, there's a lot of work to do. But I am pleased that, you know, in the future I'll still have, you know, a small role that involves still climate work, because I do feel strongly about it. In fact, I didn't know what I was going to do on my departure, and what I'm setting out to do in the near future. They're all about the challenges of our time, climate change, issues around online extremism and radicalisation. I want to keep playing a role, making a difference where I can, no matter how minor.
You mentioned child poverty, and of course it was a huge area of focus and a goal that you had to tackle. Now, I'm sure that you can quote lots of statistics about what has been achieved, and yes, there has been movement. Absolutely, I accept that. But we both know that there are many children in New Zealand that are still living in poverty. Did you do enough?
I don't think I would be ever satisfied knowing that we had any child living below the poverty line. So
no.
Well, no. Until the job is done. But that doesn't change that I'm proud of what we did do. And I do believe it's made a significant difference. We're on a different trajectory with child poverty in New Zealand than when we came into office. And that's in spite of an economic crisis.
That's right, but you know, some of the most vulnerable kids, those that are living in emergency housing in motels, aren't being counted.
And well, again, I don't want to go down a bit of a debate on the way the stats work. Let me pull back instead. You know, when we came in, we had kids that were missing out on the basics. No one, I think, in New Zealand thinks that's right. And the fact that we had such unity of purpose, that New Zealanders actually, when we said, actually we're going to make record increases in benefits, there was a time where I don't know that we would have had such widespread support for that, but we did, and we did it. We finally restored the benefit cuts that were made in the 1990s. We indexed benefits to wages. We put food in schools, and now we've got hundreds of thousands of kids being fed every day. We put standards around rentals so that kids wouldn't be in mouldy, damp houses. These are changes that I see as foundational. We do need to keep building on them. We need to keep tracking our progress, which is why it's now in law. So it's not just about the government I led. Every future government has to publicly account for what they do for kids in poverty, and that's a legacy we can leave.
So you're comfortable, you're happy, you're at peace with the work that you did on child poverty?
I'm not a person that will ever be satisfied. And that's why, you know, politics was the right place for me to be, because it gave me a chance to make progress. But the job's not done. That doesn't mean I leave with any regret or that I'm not proud of what we did. I am.
Yeah.
I am. I believed that we did all that we could do, and now it's time for the next team to keep doing what they can do.
It must be hard that must have been hard to step down knowing that the work needed to continue.
The job was never going to be done in 5 years, but I do believe we made a step change. That Child Poverty Reduction Act, you know, I was involved in crafting that from opposition, and we moved on that quickly because I knew one government will not fix this problem, but let's require every government, no matter what political persuasion, to commit themselves to kids in this country.
To keep going. Okay, now you've got a couple of new roles to take up when you leave this place.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's your valedictory.
Yep.
The Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, has appointed you as his special envoy on the Christchurch Call. So tell me about what you want to achieve with that role.
Yeah, so New Zealand was one of the first places in the world to experience a terror attack being live streamed in the way that it was after March 15. And that was, as you know, New Zealanders will remember, it was just absolutely horrific for the community and amplified this issue of online radicalisation. We created at that time the Christchurch Call to Action. It brought to the table governments from around the world, civil society and the tech industry. And it was in many ways a brand new way of doing things. And it recognised that actually if governments just regulate, we won't move quickly enough. AI and machine learning is another example of where the world is moving very, very quickly. How do we make sure that we see an ethical approach to what is a rapidly changing world? Things have fundamentally changed because of the Christchurch Call. It is, you will not experience what could have occurred before March 15 now because of the Christchurch Call. But there's more work to be done. We're particularly focused on how do we make sure we understand what's happening with algorithmic outcomes, content that's generated for users, and make sure that in better understanding it, we can create a more ethical approach to it. So it is something I feel strongly about. I do think we have to be more mindful of radicalisation online because we experience the outcome of it in New Zealand.
And were you worried that with you stepping down as Prime Minister, it might lose a bit of momentum or it might not continue in the same way, so you will still be very much involved?
The reason that I asked to remain involved was because I believed this piece of work has so much good that it can do, and the way it works with all three parties at the table is unique, and that's why I believe it's such an important model. I believed it had more to do, and I knew that I would have the time to do it, and I certainly have the passion for it, and that's one of the reasons I asked to remain. And I still feel a duty at a personal level to the community who are affected by March 15.
Yeah. You mentioned AI.
Yes.
And, ChatGPT-4,
Yeah.
the deep fakes that are becoming more and more concerning.
Yeah.
Stephen Hawking said it could spell the end of the human race. Elon Musk has warned it could destroy humans. Do you see AI as a danger to civilization, humanity?
I see AI as another technological advancement that has huge positive ramifications, but also has possible and obvious negative ramifications as well.
Would you go that far though?
Yeah, for me, it's about making sure that rather than in the past, when we've had technological advancement, we've powered ahead and then retrospectively tried to add safety measures and protections to reduce down the negative consequences. My plea to the industry, who I know are aware of these issues too, and I know share that concern. My plea would be, let's not build it and then try and retrofit, because that's what we did with the issue of, live streaming.
Yeah, with social media, yeah.
Let's think about that alongside the development of these new technologies. Let's think about ethical AI use and development. Let's think about the safety mechanisms. Let's think about it in advance.
Do you support the moratorium that Elon Musk and others have called for 6 months?
Look, there's a lot of commentary around, what the motivations behind moratoriums are, what impact it might have. I just come back to my starting point that I actually think by and large those who are developing these tools are mindful of its power. And my plea would just simply be, don't build and retrofit. Let's think about these issues as we go together with civil society, with government, with the industry.
Your other new endeavour announced today is with Prince William's Earthshot Prize.
Yes.
You'll be joining the board. How did that come about?
Look, I've been aware of this project for a very long time, Earthshot, which is designed to do two things. It's a version of the Nobel Prize, but for climate action, focusing on waste reduction, air quality, protecting our oceans, and climate action generally, and nature, and the preservation and restoration of nature. And it aims to amplify some of the innovation in these areas, but also to demonstrate that there is cause for optimism. You know, when we focus on the solutions that do exist or are being developed, and ensure that they're available at scale, where they're needed, when they're needed, then I think we can demonstrate to the next generation that there is cause to feel hopeful for our future if we accelerate and support those innovators. That's what Earthshot does. So I'm really proud to be a part of the board. Prince William and I spoke about his plan and dream for this before it had a name, and so to be able to come back full circle and support his work alongside an amazing board, I feel very lucky.
It's very special, isn't it?
It is special, yeah.
Would you ever consider returning into Parliament?
No.
5 years, 10 years, even
No.
20 years, you're ruling it out completely.
I am.
You would never come back into politics.
This is it for me. Absolutely, this is it for me. Yeah, this is a full farewell.
I will be skewered if I don't ask how are things with the wedding.
Oh, yeah. You know,
Are there any plans?
It's fair to say that Clark and I have this quite long to-do list, which includes a lot of home maintenance.
And the wedding's just right
and
down the bottom.
the wedding is on that list. We will
Maybe when Neve's in high school,
Yeah.
you'll get around to it. Okay.
We will get married, but there's a bunch of things that we're working our way through that we've postponed for so long. But you know, I think it'll feel really special when we do. Yeah.
You're giving your valedictory tomorrow. What's your final message for New Zealanders?
Oh, thank you.
Gosh, it's going to be an emotional time for you, isn't it?
Yeah. Happy.
Yeah. Where does that emotion come from?
15 years of being here. Just a privilege. Yeah.
You've grown up here,
Yeah, I was young.
haven't you? You've grown up in this
Look, at the
Parliament.
time when I came here, I didn't feel particularly young. But when I look back on it, and going through 10 years of opposition boxes, I said, gosh, I was very earnest. I worked incredibly hard. I have all these members' bills that I drafted on adoption, on legal aid, on child poverty, you know, all the things that I then had the privilege of being involved in as a Prime Minister. I would never have imagined I would be so lucky.
And will you be able to be a normal Kiwi walking down the street?
I always felt like I was, you know, even when I was Prime Minister, I found it very hard to shift that mindset. I remember quite early on, I went to Kmart to try and find pregnancy pants. I was just standing in the middle of Kmart, kind of staring into the middle distance, trying to figure out what aisle to go to. And this woman came up and she just stood right in front of me and she said, "Shop at Kmart, legit." And she just walked off. And so I think, you know, I often think about that because, you know, all of the things that I'd usually do, I just kept doing. And it's
But you did it with DP.
I did it with DPS, which,
I can imagine the other things you need to shop for as a pregnant woman as well.
You know, I just always found it hilarious. Sometimes just for a laugh, I'd take them underwear shopping to see how far away they'd try and hide when I was
searching for maternity bras, or
the
just
one time where they would be off like 100 metres away.
Oh my gosh, get a little bit of space.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that interview.
No trouble.